Right now, as you're watching this video, your brain is physically changing. Every single thought you think is literally rewiring your neural pathways. And here's what's absolutely mind blowing: when you think, I can't do this or this is too hard, you're not just having a negative thought, you're shrinking your prefrontal cortex. Now, I went more in depth in about this process in the previous video, but for a quick recap, scientifically, we have discovered that our limiting thoughts are doing something terrifying to the brain. They're actually making the amygdala, your fear center, larger, and they're making your problem solving centers smaller. And the scariest part is this happens faster than you think because this is the power of our words. So stay with me here because today we're going to talk about accelerated ways to reprogram what's going on in your head, how to change that in the fastest way possible. So, my name is Dina Moore, and I would just like to ask before I get too far along, pretty please give me a thumbs up, and pretty please subscribe now if you haven't already. I'm charming, I'm funny, I'm smart, and I hope you love all of these videos. Okay, all right, so there's my little plug. Let's get right back to the important part of this video. Okay, so how do we create immediate change? When we're using these phrases like, it's hard, I can't, I don't know how, they're creating this emotional state in us of helplessness. It triggers our stress response. It has this cascading effect that I went into in great detail in the previous video. How do we change that? Okay, this is going to sound simple, but I don't care because it works. If a simple phrase of it's hard hijacks your brain, then we start with the simple words, I'm learning. So I covered that in the last video. We're going to go into a little bit more depth of how this transformation process actually starts to happen. So literally, MRI studies have shown that when we change our thought patterns by changing our words, literally they can detect different brain activations in different parts of the brain within minutes. So you may not feel like it's making a difference in your life yet just by changing a phrase, but your brain is changing. Your brain is already changing. We could scientifically prove that within minutes your biology and your chemistry is changing. So the early changes start to happen within 1 to 3 weeks of changing any sort of limiting belief. And during this time period, the neural pathways are still kind of weak. Your stress response starts to decrease, your cognitive flexibility starts increasing. Real, more permanent structural changes start happening within 1 to 2 months. Then dendritic growth starts to happen. That's your neurons literally starting to grow new branches, and we start creating these new neuroplasticity is what we start doing. So how do we accelerate that process? Well, the word is one way to do it, and if you do nothing else, change the words. Catch yourself when you're saying it's hard, I can't, etc., and start changing that to I'm learning, I'm improving, I'm growing, I'm blossoming. Start catching that first of all. Then we're going to start adding in what we call like a multisensory, a multimodality approach, which means that while the words themselves are powerful, as we start combining visualizations, physical movement, and behavioral changes, that ridiculously speeds up the rewiring process that we're doing. So, how can we do this? What are some of the easiest ways that we can use these multimodalities? Well, first of all, while we want to make sure that we're catching our internal dialogue, that's the words that we're thinking silently, the rewiring process will happen a lot faster when we can hear it auditorily. Speak the words out loud. There's more power in the spoken voice than there is in the silent voice. This is also going to sound corny, and I don't even care. Write it down. okay? Because we're using physical movement. Your brain, in order to write something down, is going to be activating other areas of your brain. So if you're physically writing it down on a post-it note, on a journal, on a chalkboard, a whiteboard, whatever, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't even really matter what you do with it after. The physical movement of writing down, I'm learning, I'm improving, I'm growing, helps to start cross-wiring your brain. Visualize success scenarios. Whatever it is that you're trying to learn. Maybe you're trying to learn manifesting. Maybe you're trying to learn yoga. Maybe you're wanting to learn another language or a musical instrument. Visualize the success. That will help your brain understand what you're going towards. Let's take a musical instrument. Um, Maybe you've never picked up a violin. Maybe you've never picked up a guitar or anything like that before. When your brain automatically thinks, I can't, what are the mental images that are automatically attached to that statement? Failure, disaster. Obviously, you're not sitting around playing music. And the brain moves forward, not with just alone the words, but also the pictures that those words create that we're moving towards. That's why visualizations of success teach the brain what I'm learning means. What does I'm learning mean? Well, I'm learning means that you're playing the violin, that you're strumming the guitar, that you're singing, that you're speaking a new language. And then like a laser, the brain can focus on that because now that is the destination. Another thing, another modality that we want to encourage, so we've got the kinesthetics by actually writing. That actually can also activate the visuals because we're actually seeing what we have written down. The auditory, as we say it out loud, we're visualizing. Again, that also reinforces not only just seeing what we have written down, but visualizing our success. Feeling the emotion, feeling what it will feel like once the goal is accomplished. Once feeling what I can, I'm doing this. What does that feel like? Now, the reason why this is important is because it's cross wiring our brain. Um, for many years, we use this right left brain comparison. Actually, technically, the brain is way more complicated than that, but I'm going to use right left brain because that's the easiest metaphor here. We have the part of our brain, the side of our brain that's responsible for the logic, fact, data, information, decision making. And then we have the other part, the part that's responsible for the emotion, for the creativity, for the imagination, spirituality. That side of the brain is usually more related to like our unconscious part of the mind, whereas the logic side is more the conscious. So we've got conscious, unconscious, two separate functions, what we're doing. Many times, if we're just focusing on logic, we have a failure to launch. So there are probably many examples that you can personally think of examples of why logic alone is not enough to change behavior. You might logically know that you should work out. You might logically know that you're going to lose weight. You might logically know something, and that does not cross wire to the emotional side where all the motivation is. Okay. Logic alone does not overwrite the emotional side of the brain. No matter how logical we think we are, maybe you are logical, logic in itself alone does not hold the power to transform your life. It's the emotions that have the power, no matter how logical we are. So as you start activating the words along with the feeling of what success feels like, about what accomplishment feels like, about what the end result feels like, you're cross wiring the brain and your results are going to be way faster. So, the next accelerated brain tip is going to be physical movement also helps the brain rewire. Well, what kind of physical movement are we talking about? Anything, really. dancing, martial arts, swimming, jumping jacks, cross marching, any sort of cross lateral movements, any sort of movement creates a different impact as you're saying these words, as you're visualizing these words, as you're writing this down. Okay, how do you apply that? Well, I think sometimes we get stuck in ruts where we sit down, maybe you already have a practice of meditation, so you sit down first thing in the exact same spot, the exact same time frame. You harness your mental prowess and you feel on top of the world. And as soon as you go downstairs, as soon as you go out to the car, it's all gone. It's crazy. You've lost it. We haven't trained that program in the brain to apply to different scenarios. Okay? We've trained the brain that as you sit in this spot, you feel optimistic. As you sit in this spot, you feel empowered. As you sit in this spot, you feel abundant. And it doesn't apply to the rest of the world. We need this programming to go everywhere. We need this programming to follow us everywhere. And the fastest, easiest way to do that is to be training on the go, which means that you're in different scenarios through life. You're doing different movements. You're already at the gym. You take a walk. You're doing yoga with intention. So you're doing these physical poses while you're mentally rehearsing your empowering thoughts. And this will accelerate ridiculously your mental programming. Other quick methods, I'll just go over the theta brainwave. The theta brainwave is a slower brainwave. It's the brainwave that we usually access when we can get into a really deep meditation. It's where our best sleep occurs. We typically the first thing that happens in the morning, we're probably still in that brainwave just a little bit. So if we can induce the theta brainwave, we will also accelerate whatever programming we're trying to do. You can do this through there are YouTube videos. This is soundtrack is what it is. And it slows down those brain waves, which is what makes brain training a lot faster. So novelty, this is another thing that will speed up, increase, and enhance your neuroplasticity and the growth of these little bitty beautiful things called dendrites, which are your best friends, and you want to love them and make them grow because this is what keeps your brain healthy. Novelty activities are a phenomenal way to increase brain health, especially as you're going through this process of changing these limiting beliefs to things that are more powerful. So, what is a novelty thing? Well, I mentioned an instrument, learning a language. As you're starting to combine these phrases, I'm learning while you're actually learning something difficult, that is fantastic. uh, Puzzles, games, not on your phone. I would not suggest that because, again, we want to incorporate the senses. Get an actual jigsaw puzzle, get an actual puzzle. It engages your visuals, it engages your all of your senses. And as you're putting this puzzle together, you're repeating this new form of thinking, this new form of being. I'm learning. I'm doing something different. I'm learning something new. Do not underestimate the power of this. You know what? To accomplishing this is not even the task. We don't even care if you learn the instrument or if you actually learn a foreign language. That is not the point. Because remember, these new patterns, your brain is making changes instantly. Within 1 to 3 weeks there's significant change. 30 days to 60 days, you're definitely noticing a difference. And 3 to 6 months, your brain is completely transformed. Now, a lot of people are not going to be able to learn an instrument in 30 days. You're not going to be able to learn an entirely new language in 60 days. You could, you can. But the end goal is not necessarily the result. What you're doing is you're feeding the beast. You're giving it something to digest. You're giving it something to do, and that's what your brain loves. So obviously, learning language is a great goal. But if you actually really don't care about accomplishing that, do it anyway because you're putting new input in your brain. Okay. So, when are some good times? When's the best time to do this? Well, immediately after exercise is a good time. Meditation, obviously, during meditation, when that theta state is enhancing our neuroplasticity, that's a great time. Before sleep, right as you wake up, all of those are great times to start doing this. One other thing that I want to point out too is I want to give you all of these tips, but I want you to feel empowered. And I don't want you to feel like you have to do all of this all or nothing kind of mentality. These are acceleration tips, but the truth is, consistency is better than all of this quantity. All of these techniques mean nothing if you don't actually do them. Honestly, if your only goal is to do this 5 to 10 minutes a day, you're winning. 5 to 10 minutes a day, and you are learning. You are taking a weed whacker through your brain and hacking new paths, and that is the goal. Another quick tip here too: environmental cues. That's a fancy way of saying post-it notes. Visual reminders so that we can constantly be reinforcing our new ideas. Maybe have those little alphabet little magnets that go on the refrigerator. Put your new phrases on the refrigerator. Every time you go to the refrigerator, this is reinforced. Write it in lipstick on the mirror in the bathroom. The visual cues, those visual reminders start serving as triggers so that this starts coming automatically, because very quickly you won't need to be focusing on it. You got enough repetition going on there that you've created these new neural pathways. Audio programs, that's fantastic. YouTube videos, the more you feed and encourage and fertilize these new thoughts, the more likely they are to take root faster. You know, there's phrases, I can only think of the one in Spanish. Basically, in a nutshell, it says, tell me who your friends are, tell me who you walk with, who you spend time with, and I'll tell you who you are. So, who are we spending time with that is encouraging these thoughts? Well, maybe it doesn't even necessarily have to be a human being. That's why I mentioned these audio tracks, YouTube, self help, anything that's constantly encouraging us to be thinking like this. Books. Be careful too during this very sensitive reprogramming time that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot by cross wiring both programs at the same time. So, if we're watching something on TV that is self defeating, or if we're engaging in drama conversations with friends, or if we're constantly listening to somebody that's like, what are you doing? You're going to learn Russian? What are you, crazy? Nope, that is not the reinforcement that we want. Take that out of the equation. Starving those old neural pathways is the goal. We want to feed the new and starve the old. Okay, so please leave me some comments. Again, pretty please, pretty please, pretty please, because I want to know what thoughts come up. I want to know, actually, you know what I really want to know? What challenges are you having? Because maybe these tips are not super new, but what stopped you from implementing them? Or if you try this for 3 or 4 or 5 days and then you fall off the wagon, I want to know why, because I will give you a video for that. That is important, because I know that if one person is feeling that, there are more people feeling that. So please like and subscribe, leave me your comments, and I will talk to you soon. Mwah.